it's Christmas season. We can admit he came down in a manger into our mess. There's something beautiful about Emmanuel, that he was born where the poop was. And our lives sometimes feel like we're in that spot. We can focus on who we want to be. What's integrity for me? I might not have wanted to choose this situation, but I can accept today because today is what I've got.
Well, friends, welcome to this week's episode of The Boundless Show. This is Lisa Anderson here with you. We are now in December. I am so grateful that we have the chance to celebrate the holidays together. We made it through Thanksgiving. Now we're heading into Christmas and the New Year. And I think you're going to find this week's show very appropriate on a number of levels for where we are in the calendar year. Okay, here we are now for our roundtable. Another great group of people. In fact, two brand new guests to the Boundless Show. We've got our, I'm not going to say old, I'm going to say long-tested friend. I don't exactly know how to say. Our dear counselor friend Geremy Keeton is here. Geremy, it's always good to have you. Good to be back on
Boundless. Good to be here.
It's always good to have you. He's usually in our inbox segment because you know that so many of our counselors answer inbox. But we were like, you know what? We're going to give you a chance on the roundtable. We're going to let you do it. So here he is. And then dear friends, Cynthia and Tracy are here as well, ladies. So good to see you.
Great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Okay, so these ladies, well, actually, Jeremy's a dad, but these two ladies are moms. And that is because today's topic, I got to give you a little background on this because it was actually a friend of mine in California who's a boomer who was basically talking to me one time. And she's like, have you ever done anything on your show about like young adults who cancel their parents for various reasons? And she said, because I have friends of mine who are really struggling because some of their kids have canceled them because of politics. Some of them have canceled them because they didn't get the COVID vaccine. Some of them have canceled them because they don't like their parenting style and now they have young kids and they don't want or they don't like how much they talk about Jesus or whatever. There's faith arguments or whatever. And so I think this, if you're a young adult listening, I hope this is really instructive for you because we have talked on the Boundless Show before about your struggles with your parents, maybe in communicating and feeling heard. Obviously, if you heard me intro the show, our inbox is like, my parents don't want me to do missions. Don't they care about God? Okay, so we understand that. I want to turn the tables this week and let parents talk about some of the things, that hurtful situations, straight up, quite frankly, with young adult children. And so, in fact, I think, Geremy, I'm going to ask you right here, because isn't people calling in to focus on the family and talking to counselors, issues around relationships with young adult children, isn't that one of the biggest reasons people call?
Our highest volume of a parenting-related situation call out of our 1,200 calls a month is parenting relationship with adult children. Some aspect of adult children. Teens would be second of the parenting segment of calls. So you're correct about that.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So, okay, so I'm going to start with Cynthia and Tracy, and I want to ask you guys, because we want to get a little bit of a vision for what this looks like in real life, okay? So the first thing I want to ask you is give us a little picture of your situation, your relationship or non-relationship with your adult children, maybe how many kids you have, and really when and how did this start that tensions have arisen and over what? So Cynthia, why don't you go ahead and start?
Oh, wow. I'm so thankful that I'm not alone, Geremy, that this is a big problem that there's probably answers to. But I have 3 boys, and they're all in their 20s, and they've all left the Lord after growing up in the church their whole life and being there every time the doors opened. One of them claims he's a Satanist, but I think he really means humanist because he thinks Satanists help people. The other one is probably Marxist socialist, and we have the most political discussions together. And the youngest is just kind of meh, like he'll go to church with he's the only one that's married, and he'll go to church with his wife sometimes, but definitely they're all living away from the Lord.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that really sets the stage. And obviously, we talk about this at Boundless all the time of the rate of young adults, quote unquote, deconstructing their faith. I mean, the challenge comes when they don't reconstruct it. If they just decide to walk away, or they're like, I don't really even know what this means. I don't care. I don't want to listen to those quote unquote church people anymore. The Bible isn't true. So you truly aren't alone, Cynthia. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah. Tracy, how about you?
Yeah, I've got 4 children, adult children. 3 of them are married. My 3 boys are the ones who have canceled me as their parent. It was out of nowhere. It was a complete shock to me. One moment we're having a wonderful Thanksgiving meal with the entire family, including grandkids. Everybody's there. Everybody's happy. And then next thing I know, I'm getting letters and texts from my daughter-in-laws of what a horrible mother I have been to my boys, and that they no longer want me in their life. So it just kind of came out of nowhere, and I really struggled with why. And they refused to communicate over that. And it's been 3.5 years that I have not spoken to my 3 sons, their children. And I still have my daughter here locally. We have a fantastic relationship. But again, we were a ministry family. We grew up in church. My late husband was a pastor. And even my daughter has walked away from her faith as well, is no longer in church. And I believe that's because our family went through a lot of suffering with treatment from the church.
Like church hurt
so,
kind of
yeah.
stuff. Yeah. No, that makes
Yeah.
sense. So if the two of you had to, just kind of, I don't know, hypothesize, or, I mean, again, it's so bonkers to me to think that your adult children who you raised, whatever, you're just saying, like Tracy, like you said, I don't even know how this came about. Like, it's so wild to think, how could you not know? I mean, what would clearly you've asked the question, you said they're not even willing to talk about it, whatever, but what do you think, either of you, were some of the main issues? Just kind of, I don't believe any of this anymore? Or, I mean, is there like personal animosity or anger about relational stuff? What do you think?
Fortunately for me, I still have great communication with them. We still talk. I think what started them on this path is the legalization of pot in high school, the phones, the media, that just became more of the input that they took in. They stopped wanting to go to church with us. In some cases, it was friendships that just kind of pulled them in different directions. And then mom and dad weren't smart anymore. We don't know what we're talking about. So that was part of it, for me at least.
Yeah. So what, I'm going to come over to Tracy in a second, but just to follow up on that, Cynthia, what are the types of things that you can talk about? Like when you do, because you're in relationship, you're able to communicate. Yeah. What is safe space? What does it look like for you to gain ground in conversation with your boys?
Especially with my middle son, he is a video gamer.
Oh.
And so
now you're a gamer. You're an expert gamer?
No.
Oh, okay.
We don't game together. But he does share a lot of, like just last night, an anime show that he's watching.
Okay.
And he'll play me cat videos because he knows I like cats. He'll play me just things that have caught him on TikTok. And it's more like this phone is the way that we can interact and laugh together. And, we usually in person, we stay off the tricky subjects, the politics,
especially.
Because he's very strong about that. And my oldest, he's in a special program right now to soberette. And we still talk about Jesus. I still let him know how much Jesus loves him and supports him and wants the best for him. And
yeah, that's great. Okay, so Tracy, you obviously said the boys aren't in communication with you. What are good, solid conversations for you and your daughter? What does that look like? And is your daughter, does she mediate conversations between you and her brothers, or is that like an awkward situation? Like, what does that look like for the whole family dynamic?
Sure. My daughter is in communication with her brothers, but they do not talk about me. One of my sons, apparently, I know from her and her communication, one of my sons will say occasionally, "Tell Mom I love her." But that's about as far as it goes. There's no back and forth communication there. Now, as far as the communication with my daughter, we have learned through a lot of tears and a lot of angst of just how to communicate better. I think the surprise to her was, I just need you to tell me. Just tell me what's going on, and so we can figure it out. Once we got over that hurdle, then it was her letting me know where the boundaries were. What I'm comfortable talking to you about, what I'm not comfortable talking about. With her, basically, the only thing that's kind of a touchy subject is talking about church. We can talk about God and prayer and Bible and anything like that, but not church or church attendance.
Interesting. Okay. So if you were to, kind of getting back to my previous question where I got a little bit sidelined, if you were to guess at why this became about you personally and why the communication had to be cut off and why you're not a safe person apparently or whatever, what would you say? Why is that?
I honestly am at a loss for that one. I really do not know for the boys. I know that losing their dad was a big thing for them. I don't know if at some point they felt that I did not walk them through that in a healthy way. That may have triggered some of it. I'm not sure. Everything is me guessing at what it could be. I just know that all of a sudden I went from loving mom to toxic. Those are the words. You're toxic.
Right. Okay, so Geremy, talk to us a little bit about, whether situations like Tracy and Cynthia find themselves in, or even some of the lesser ones that I described, where it's just like, we voted a different way or we whatever. Is this a newer phenomenon, or why does it seem so prevalent that literally adults growing up in ostensibly loving homes, having a lot of history together, all of a sudden it's just like, we cannot communicate, we cannot do conflict, we cannot be in the same room as one another? Where's this coming from?
Yeah, I think we have in the recent, 5 years, decade, seen a lot more of cancel culture type ethic out there. At the same time, families have had strains always. But the way it is played out now in a polarized America, and some of the patterns of, social response, this cancel button, if you will, is more readily modeled and available in our social media culture. I think it's playing part in this. And I just want to say, like we do on our phone lines with the precious friends of the ministry who call us to talk about these things, is to first just acknowledge the depth of pain and the depth of grief that moms like these precious moms and dads out there are carrying, but also the complexity. Our family systems, every story is different, and we usually have, whether they're right or wrong, or I'm not saying that, we usually have reasons, maybe misplaced reasons, or we have reasons for all of our behaviors. They come out of our best attempts to try to be okay. And when wrong information or untruthful information or lack of coping skills or lack of emotional processing of things in a healthy way can go sideways, and we have, this big cultural option now of canceling folks. Now, I will also say, just lest our listeners, out there, because there's so many situations. We're on a broadcast, right? There are some unsafe situations that what's hard about the term abuse or toxic is that when it is appropriately defined, there are abusive situations where you must seek safety. But then when a powerful word like abuse or toxic is misapplied or overly applied, then you have grievous damage and lost opportunities as well. And so that's why even here, at Focus, when you read our material, we have a website, focusonthefamily.com/abusive relationships. We're very careful at how we instruct and try to create safety for situations that really need intervention, as well as being careful how we define abuse, because you also have this sanctity of family. Even if you don't agree ultimately on your faith, there's still something God-given and good and pro-social about working through the emotional processes and staying in touch with one another when it's safe to do so. And so just acknowledging that there's a lot of complex situations, there's a lot of grief and pain, and there's almost always reasons that we're carrying on all sides of this why we're coping with our pain the way that we are.
Yeah. So Cynthia and Tracy, would you say you're in the middle of it now, but whether it's communication or distance or whatever, just relating now, previously, would you say there have been any missteps that you've made where you've had to kind of course correct and say, okay, well, maybe I need to approach this situation or this portion of the relationship differently? Or what would you say you have learned through this process as far as your parenting and loving adult children, whether you're in communication or not? What does that look like for you as far as checking yourself and going to the Lord and saying, okay, Lord, what do I learn from this? What do I do differently?
I think that was a big wake-up call for me, was that maybe my parenting was not as perfect as I thought it was. I thought I was, the number one mom on the planet. I had done everything right. And then you get a situation like this that just drops in your lap. And it does take you to a place where you really need to do some self-evaluation. And in doing that, I had learned that I had probably held on too tight when they were older teenagers and young 20s. I should have given more space and encouraged them to be more independent. So that was a mistake that I had picked up on. And I think what the most important thing that I've learned through this whole thing is that my relationship with the Lord is what needs to come first. And I think a lot of times as mothers, we put our children first, and we forget that relationship with the Lord is what needs to take priority. So
that's good insight. So, Cynthia?
I would say for me, we had a lot of boundaries in our home, and sometimes their friends didn't have the same boundaries, and so we became bad guys. I think I would want to listen more and be a safe place for them to share struggles that they were going through. I think sometimes maybe they'd go to a friend instead of to Dad and me, and so I think I would listen more. I would definitely listen more.
Yeah, awesome.
And Lisa, the beauty of these conversations is that in all things, the Lord, and it's Christmas season, we can admit He came down in a manger into our mess. There's something beautiful about Emmanuel, that He was born where the poop was. And our lives sometimes feel like we're in that spot. And the closeness of the Lord for you and even for your children is real and powerful and true, even when uncomfortable things are happening. Mm-hmm. And the beautiful thing is, if you choose to receive the support as parents, or these the young people who are growing through this apart from you in some ways, choose to get wise things in their life, mm-hmm. we can all still grow. Mm-hmm. We can focus on who we want to be, what's integrity for me. I might not have wanted to choose this situation, mm-hmm. but I can accept mm-hmm. today, because today is what I've got. How am I going to learn and grow and reflect? How do I own what I want to own and learn that I need to own, and not own what I can't own, and being balanced in that self-reflection? It is an opportunity, although you might not choose it, for some deep growth, and having basically an open heart, and a healthy heart, if relationship were to become available, and you can relate in a non-reactive way when that becomes available.
Yeah. So to that point, Geremy, so these ladies are listening. We've got tons of parents of young adults who listen to the show. We have tons of young adults who are on the other side of this equation, maybe feeling like, yeah, but I feel distant from my mom or my dad, or they left us when I was a kid, or whatever. What is your advice for a next step? Is there any hope for building a bridge for, I don't have a counseling degree, but here's my bit of advice, because I know it's good. We have got to bathe this in prayer. Those who know Jesus and love Jesus, he is the only one who can change hearts. We might try to get our kids in church and try to get people reading their Bibles and try to get them to communicate with us. We could send 1 billion texts and whatever, but God has to do the work, But what can folks listening right now, whether they're the young adult or they're the parent in this equation, what does hope look like practically?
Well, I think one thing is focusing on your emotional and spiritual well-being as an individual on your side of your fence, mm-hmm. In your yard, as we say, staying in your yard, not in someone else's yard, because that's all you can appropriately and healthfully do. So I think hope looks like being the best version, growing, humble version of yourself as you can be. The Lord loves a humble and contrite heart. And also, I think if the listeners are in some ability to converse, if there is an issue that is the sticking point, there's this thing that we just can't get over, this family conflict, or this thing about money, or this thing about this one fight that happened 6 years ago or 2 years ago, and if we don't get that issue cleared up, we can't move forward. One thing that might be appropriate, and again, if it is truly physically safe to do so, is to say, I don't know that we can or will hash out the details of that event, but I'm looking at life, and I have 2 decades, 3 decades left. I would like to see what we can make of the next 2 to 3 decades. We have a few laps on this track before we're in heaven, and so let's focus on what we can do and construct, and let the emotional connection where we can have it, and sometimes that will thaw some of the old wounds. Of course, I'm an advocate of family counseling. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I believe that if individuals can have a good facilitator, and there's openness to that, learning what buttons and what wounds are being carried, and finding appropriate communication tools for that in small little snippets where you go slow with family counseling. Of course, I want to mention that can be useful as well. But ultimately, walking with the comfort of the Lord and growing is, for us as believers, that can't be underplayed. That's not just a trite answer. It's a real answer. The Spirit of all comfort being with you and helping you grow, and being an inviting presence to your family member when they're kind of observing your life.
Yeah. And just the fact that He's a relational God, and He cares about your kids more than you do. Right. He cares about you more than they do or don't. And I think it is just, again, it's putting that big perspective on things of, we don't know what He's doing behind the scenes, and so there's always hope. Right. You guys, I've just so appreciated this. I do want to make listeners aware of the fact that I mentioned that Geremy's part of our counseling department. If you go to Boundless.org/counseling, you will see what our counseling department has to offer. There's resources there. There are additional contacts there. You also can, through that or through our number, 1-800, the letter A and the word family, place a call and get a complimentary consultation from one of our counselors that may set you on the road towards next steps that need to happen. And one of the neatest things about that is they have access to a whole network across the country of counselors that they can put you in touch with right in your own area for continued care. And so you might be the one who has to kind of take that first step if it's with related to a relationship with your parent, or maybe you're the parent who's listening and you're absolutely resonating with what Cynthia and Tracy have said. You're only responsible for you, y'all. That's all you can do. And so what is God telling you to do? So again, boundless.org/counseling or 1-800, the letter A, the word family. All of that is going to be in our show notes as well. So Cynthia and Tracy and Geremy, thank you so much. Such a hard topic, and so much for our hearts in that. But I really appreciate your boldness and courage and sharing your stories. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amen.